I used to be someone who used to keep all my ideas to myself. Like unfortunately, I was one of those people who was worried that someone would steal my idea and take it. But because I was thinking of this in a very open, community-centered way, I ended up sharing it. And it was that sharing that meant that when I shared things like the design for pillars, the very first designs for pillars, that the tweets went viral.
Welcome to another episode of the Muslim Pound podcast. I'm your host Zaid Patel, and today we have the founder of Pillars, Abdul Rahman Abbas. Welcome to the podcast.
Assalamu alaikum, Zaid.
Salam. You're not just the founder of Pillars, you're the founder of Jibreel. You're a doctor. You used to help your dad with a business, a golf visa.
Yeah.
And probably a whole load of other things.
Yeah.
So tell us, how or why did you decide to become a doctor?
Good question. I didn't really decide to become a doctor, is the honest truth. I kind of went into it because at the time of like GCSEs, A-levels, when you're kind of making that decision of what you want to do next, people are starting to think about their interests. And at the time, I didn't really have a specific thing that I wanted to do. I did enjoy the sciences and biology and chemistry, maths, those sort of things that you typically do when you do medicine. Those were interests of mine. I'd say tech and IT were also interests. But from family, my family have a background in medicine. Family friends are mostly doctors. So whenever we're doing family gatherings, it's always doctors and their children, often doctors as well, or medical students. So the honest truth is that I didn't have a specific thing that I wanted to do. And I just kind of, it was almost like if you can get into medical school, you might do it. And I think that mainly comes from a background of parents and family from the Middle East, where being a doctor is seen as the peak thing that you can do in your life, which I think's changed a lot, but is still a sentiment in a lot of kind of my immigrant families, like my parents. So yeah, I think that's why I ended up in it. I'm obviously very involved in tech now, but I don't regret going to medical school. I think it's taught me a lot about soft skills, how to talk, how to communicate, being under pressure, stress, exam stress, being as an actual doctor in a hospital stress. All those things are, you can call them character building moments, and I don't think there's anything bad about going through it. But yeah, I think I've discovered as I went through medical school that actually I have interests that are broader than just the medical field. Yeah.
Are you still practicing?
So I worked for 2 years as a doctor, and as of 2 months ago, I decided that I'm going to take some time out. So at the moment, I did what you call the foundation years, which are the first 2 years after you finish medical school. And then after that, you can decide to do training. So you can go into surgical training, medical training, etc. A lot of people decide not to do that, and they do what they call an F3, which is not a technical term, not a formal term, but essentially indicates you doing like a gap year kind of thing in the medical, like a sabbatical year. I don't know what you guys call it in the industry, but essentially people do different things. Some people go to Australia and New Zealand. Some people do research. Some people do locuming, which is where you do kind of odd shifts to fill up rota gaps. Some people do consultancy. I personally decided it's a perfect time to go and at least experiment full time on my tech interests and work on things like Pillars and Jibreel full time, inshallah.
You mentioned your upbringing, and you mentioned there's a lot of doctors in the family.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about your upbringing.
Yeah, so my mother's Palestinian, my dad's Iraqi, so I come from an Arab background. I was born in the UK, grew up in the UK. I had a mixed educational experience. I went to a state school for most of my life, but then I went to grammar school for sixth form. So I saw kind of two different environments. One was a lot more kind of high socioeconomic community, more kind of supported community, very high achieving, and then the other one was a lot more mixed, I'd say, people from more disadvantaged backgrounds. To be honest, I think that was great having both experiences. It's kind of made me, I think, be able to navigate myself around these different communities and also understand actually both sides, if that makes sense. And then I went to university. I went to UCL for medical school. I did my neuroscience degree at university and practiced as a doctor for 2 years, and I got a further educational degree in education, medical education specifically, whilst I was practicing as a doctor. So that's kind of my LinkedIn profile, if you want, up until now. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I think when I was growing up, I think I didn't come from a wealthy background. My parents were, I wouldn't say extremely in the poverty group, I would say. Alhamdulillah, we always had food on the table, just about. But there were very difficult days where it wasn't easy. Like we would get to, I remember a situation, I think I was just about old enough, I don't think my brother was old enough, where we would be at the checkout in the supermarket and my mum would see that the total was too high and essentially have to take some things back because we couldn't afford it. So I've kind of seen that, but alhamdulillah, I mean, Allah's can give and take, and I think more recently in the last few years of my life, Allah's provided my family with more, and I think that's given me the flexibility to be able to do things like explore other interests. It's not lost on me the privilege that I think a lot of people don't have, which is a lot of people during medical school, just university in general, they do a lot of part-time work and things like that to be able to earn an income and cover their own costs. Whereas alhamdulillah, I've been supported quite well by my family. My dad's always been very supportive with financially, and that has given me and my brother a lot of freedom, I would say, to be able to explore things that are whatever interests us, basically. Not necessarily having to fill all that free time with part-time jobs, like hourly pay jobs, so that we can cover our own costs to go out. So alhamdulillah, and part of that actually was kind of, whilst I got a lot of help with that, kind of somewhat I would say I also helped to contribute, I guess. So I was very involved in my family business, my dad's business. You mentioned it earlier. And I think that, from a very young age, I remember sitting with my dad and doing things like his accounts. You're an accountant, so probably wouldn't approve of this, but essentially I'd sit with my dad and we would do accounts together. I was really young, like I was the IT kid that people often would, if they have a problem with a computer, I'd tend to be that person that they would turn to. So I would sit with my dad with Excel sheet. I'd understand Excel sheet quite well. He wouldn't. So he would kind of tell me what to write, and I'd input it and kind of do the sums, etc. So I was doing that from a young age, and then as I got older and I was able to do more, I was starting to do things like manage the website, do the design for the website, marketing. I did Google Ads, things like that, and I started to get more involved in marketing, even optimizing things like changing our payment processor company so that we had a cheaper one, and just get more and more involved in the business side. And I think that was a big contributor to how I think and how entrepreneurial I have become as a person, having had that very early experience in business with my parents. Obviously, all that was alongside my medical school, applying to medical school and going to medical school, etc. But I think that was something that significantly impacted the way that, because I don't think a lot of people have that exposure to business. A lot of people, their parents were business and they end up doing business, right? So I think it is very much, you are a product of your social surrounding. And if I look at my upbringing, I had my dad was very involved in business, and so I had that exposure and I was very involved in it as well. At the same time, I had a lot of exposure to medicine. My mum was a doctor. A lot of our family friends were doctors, etc. And so that was it. And I ended up doing medicine and business. Yeah. So it is really a product of your upbringing.
So how old were you when you started helping your dad?
I was for the tax stuff, I can't pinpoint it, but around the age of 10 onwards, very young, in the 10, 11, 12 age. I don't know if I can say younger. I don't want to say that if I'm not sure, but yeah, I was that was my kind of main thing that I would do. I remember even during early days of medical school, and even before that in school, I would just pull out my laptop and I would be sending messages to the developers of the website of the company, making changes, improvements, optimizations, setting up Google Analytics, looking at the funnel, how does the conversion rate, help to average order value, how to increase this. I was doing loads of SEO. I learned a lot about SEO just because of the work that I was doing for my dad's company, like how to write good copy, all of that sort of stuff. A lot of marketing sort of stuff actually was marketing and website kind of work. I would say it's not a tech business, so it wasn't deep tech.
What was the business?
It's so Gulf Visa Limited. It's essentially a business that provides a service for people who are traveling from the UK to places like Saudi or the UAE. If let's say you require a visa, if you want to go to work in Saudi, you can't just go to Saudi on a plane. You have to get a work visa. You have to go to the embassy, apply for it. There's multiple checks, multiple things, documentations you have to do. And my dad, his company, Gulf Visa is an agent, essentially, that provides a service for them. So you can essentially entrust my dad with your passport and documents. He deals with the entire situation with the embassy and kind of helps make that process a lot easier and simpler, saves you a lot of time and money, avoiding you mistakes, things like that, so you don't get rejected or reduce your chances of rejection. That's the business, yeah.
So you were 10, 11 years old. How did you learn to do accounts? Or was it more your dad just telling you, put this in?
I always found, so my dad would, I remember like he had like the CD, which is like how you like, and like those dummy 101 books of like how to do Excel sheets. And I was just always fascinated by it. And so I would read those things. So I became like really good at just playing around with things like that. Like it sounds really, really boring, but I'd be like PowerPoint and Excel and things like that, like early days. I'd be just interested in playing with those things. So it wasn't so much knowing how to do accounts per se. I wouldn't be able to tell you like at that age what a gross turnover versus net, etc. is. But what I could do for my dad is at least like manage the Excel document. So I would be sat there almost doing basically the data entry, helping him manage if he needed to move a column and those stuff. Like he wouldn't be able to do that. He would just ask me to do it. So I was kind of sitting with him, helping like organize his books at the end of the year so that he could send it off to the accountants, so that they can deal with it and that sort of thing. So that was just honestly out of pure interest. Like I remember just reading stuff about it. It sounds really boring, but it used to fascinate me. I do sometimes reflect on why if I had that interest in tech in that way, it was very early tech. Why didn't I end up thinking about doing something like that at university? Like why didn't I apply to computer science or AI courses even now exist? Maybe not at the time I applied, but they do now. I don't know. I think maybe the part of my family and exposure to medicine and that world, and the mindset that in the Middle East, for example, if you are a high achieving student, you get 95% plus, and you're the equivalent of the GCSEs, which is called the Tawjihi in Jordan and most of the Middle East. If you are a high achiever, it's just a cookie cutter approach. Those people all become doctors, engineers and doctors. That's it. There's no real option. It's not like here it's different, right? If you're the smartest people, some of them do medicine, but a lot of them do go to Oxford and Cambridge. They do things like economics, PPE, etc., etc. They go to Imperial, do bioengineering, things like that. So you get a bit of a spread, right? But when it comes to our community, no, the mindset is if you're high achieving, the only option, the only thing you should be doing is medicine. Everything else is not considered as high quality or aspiring as that. So I guess when I got to that stage, the mindset was, look, if I can get high grades, I'm getting good grades in school, I'm getting good grades at GCSE and A level, then what is computer science? That concept didn't exist. It was you go for medicine. If you can't get into medicine, only then do you start to consider other things. And to be honest, even those other things tend to be medical. They're like pharmacy, biomedicine, etc. Not to say these things are not as good as medicine, but that's the mindset that people have, is that these are the things that you do. They consider the medical world to be the kind of pinnacle of aspirations. I disagree with it, but obviously that's my parents' background.
But at the time, did you agree with it? At the time, was it pretty much all you knew?
It's pretty much all I knew, and it was just my default. It's like I can't. It's not like I had an opinion to push back with.
Yeah.
So and it's not like even like my parents necessarily told me you need to apply to medicine. It was almost a default option. It was the placeholder field. It already had medicine in the form. It's kind of like you're just geared towards it. You're almost doing it like without thinking, if that makes sense. It's just an expectation that if you can get into medicine, if you're doing well, that's what you do. And I think that's actually a really bad mindset. I think it's a very individualistic mindset. I think, just think about it. If us as a Muslim community, if all of us are doing medicine, like the smartest students, how is that beneficial for the community at large, right?
Where's the accountants? Where's the solicitors?
Yeah, you need excellent lawyers. You need excellent accountants. You need excellent engineers. You need excellence across the sphere. And you need to spread it out. Otherwise, because I think what it comes down to in the core is that it's a very individualistic approach. Our parents came from a society where doctors were considered the most wealthy, the most respected. They drove the nicest cars. At the time, it would be like the Mercedes. The person in the street who drove the nice Mercedes, etc., they're the doctors. The ones with the nicest houses, the villas, they're the doctors. They live in the nice neighborhoods. So from their mindset, they think that being a doctor is the number one thing that you can do. And it will serve you as a person. It means that your family will be well off, your children will have the best opportunities, etc., which is absolutely fine. But when you get to a certain point and you start to think, okay, that's your individual needs, what about the community needs? And then you add on to that the fact that the world's changing. Being a doctor now is not like what it was before, especially in places like the UK. It's actually I don't know if you know about this, but the statistics of the number of people who are applying to medical schools for the number of places is declining rapidly, even from when I started medical school. So we're only talking 9 years ago. So from that time till now, I don't know the exact stats, but I think 30, 40, 50% easier now to get into medical school than it was before. I posted a tweet about it like a few months ago. At the moment, when you consider that we need to be thinking not just about our individual needs, we need to be thinking, what role can I do that helps provide a service to the community and serves the community? And you add on top of that the fact that medicine isn't what it was anyway in the first place. Even if you think about it from an individualistic mindset, you're just thinking about it, what am I going to benefit? For both of those reasons, you should be considering more other things. Now, I don't think that, one thing I do say to people is that if you're really passionate about medicine, obviously still apply to it. And the other thing I always tell people is that if you're not sure and you're in kind of the situation, like if I were to go back to my situation, I don't regret going through medical school. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it does a lot for you in terms of your development, your soft skills. You improve the way you communicate. You learn how to deal with things under stress. There's a lot of really key soft skills that you learn when you go through medical school and when you're a doctor. So I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it's very transferable skills that you can do to other things. But I think eventually, once you know what you want to do, you need to branch out. And if that thing is something else, then go for it.
The South Asian community has the same thing where be a doctor, be an engineer, they're kind of the pinnacle of society. And again, like you said, they're very individualistic. So how can you change that kind of mindset to being something that a community needs? And how do you even know what the community needs?
I'll take it back to what I said earlier, I think, which is you're a product of your social surroundings. If you look at like little kids, when you ask them, what do you want to do when you're older? They tend to be like, give you the same jobs that their dad is. So if their dad's a pilot, they'll be like, I want to be a pilot. If their dad's a doctor, they say, I want to be a doctor. So that's just a very like kind of crude child approach. But even if you expand that and you just think about, like, for example, what I told you earlier, I grew up and I was surrounded by doctors and I ended up going into medicine. I also grew up and I was surrounded by my dad's and his business, and the house we always had business documents around. It was kind of part of life, right? And I was very involved in it as well. So both of those things ended up me being in the business world. I think the bottom line is that you need to basically create those examples, inspirational examples, and present them to the community, showcase them, and show that these are successful people, extremely successful people in other disciplines. And when you get those role models for the youth of the community, then they'll start to aspire to be like those people. They'll start thinking, right now, I don't know about your personal experience, but when I was in university, there was the medics, and they wanted to aspire to be obviously doctors, and they wanted to be in especially the lucrative aspects of medicine, especially the surgical ones, etc. And then the non-medics tended to want to do things like investment banking and management consultancy, etc., etc. So they aspired to be part of the Deloittes and the PwCs and all these big McKinsey, all these big management consultancy firms. So that was their kind of goal. Now, if you go to somewhere like San Francisco in the Bay Area and you ask what Muslims in that area want to be, they want to work in companies like Google, and they want to work in companies like Meta and Amazon, and they want to start their own startups. They have cousins who started their own startups. So everyone is a product of their environment. Now, if we want to help get our community out of this mindset of medicine is the way to go, being a doctor, being the way to go, we have to present to our parents. Just the reason they think that those things are the best thing is because they see that the successful people are those things. So we need to show them success exists in other areas. And I don't think we have enough of those examples. I think we need to do more in getting people into to do well in those things. We need to do more in terms of presenting those things. So I think, for example, in West London Islamic Centre, mashallah, there's a few sisters there. They're doing excellent work at setting up career fairs where they have essentially invite the community. You come to the mosque and you go around and you have people from the tech community, you have people from the medicine community, you have people from the law community, etc., etc. And they walk around, so they have that like a fair where people can go around and ask. They also have like presentations. That's an excellent way to present people from that career and help encourage them to go into that. If your whole community are just full of people who are doctors, then what's the advice you're going to get? It's how to get into medical school. You're not going to get any other sort of advice. So I think that's an excellent way. And actually, the funny thing is that one of the sisters said to me relatively recently that actually they've noticed there's a lot less interest now on the medical school, kind of the medicine table, and much more interest in other areas like the tech table. So alhamdulillah, I think that's a good example of it. And I think if we can present them on social media, if we can present them, and by the way, this is, I mean, if you look at it, like this is a lot of people now, for example, are selling courses online, doing those sort of businesses, and that's because they're seeing other people do it and they're doing really well. So people do just follow each other. As soon as someone finds something that is doing well for someone else, they will just go and copy that. So I think it is as simple as presenting inspiration and role models for those individuals.
The only thing is like you said about doctors, what doctors was even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, isn't the same as today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do have that possibility that what example tech is today is not going to be like that in 20 years with the next generation. There might be another need. So how do we kind of combat that gap?
So I guess there's two ways you can think about it. One thing is that you're right. You have to have an adaptability, like you have to be ready to adapt basically. You can't be dead set on one thing and say this is never going to change. If you do that, even in the tech space, which is very fast moving, you can't put all your eggs in one basket and decide that I'm going to go all in on this one technology and not be ready to adapt to change to another technology. So you've got to have that mindset of I need to be ready to shift quickly and I can never be emotionally attached to one thing at a time. That's just a product of how quickly the world is changing, generally speaking. So you have to have that mindset. I wouldn't even say that's a tech thing. I think that's generally a thing. Even in medicine, you can't be fixated on one process and say that this is how we're going to do things and we're never going to change things. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect I would say is that just you can make an analysis today and think, okay, well, where would I put all my, if I had to make a bet today, right? If it was halal and I had to make a bet today on which market and industry is going to grow, what are people saying? And generally speaking, people are saying we're going through a tech revolution. Specifically now we're going through an AI revolution. This is now the big, like just like how there was an industrial revolution in the past, this is the current revolution at the moment. And this will dominate at least the rest of our lives. And it may be that for our lives, this is our thing, but in our children's lives, it will be something else. I imagine it will be technology related, but it might not be AI. It could be something else. A lot of people say AI is the end game, but I'm sure that conversation has been said before. I don't know whether it is or not. I don't think I have enough knowledge on it. But my point is that yes, you have to be, like I hope I'm not in the same situation where I tell my kids you should do X, Y, Z in technology. And just like how I would consider my parents' advice or other people in our communities, uncles and aunties' advice a little bit outdated. I don't want to be outdated. So this idea of open-mindedness, I think is actually probably if you could put it down to one characteristic, the idea of being open-minded is probably the most important characteristic out of it all. And avoiding being stubborn and closed-minded is probably the key to future success. Because if you have that open-mindedness, then you can adapt. And if you don't, then you're going to be stuck. And you could end up realizing when things are too late. So I think that's how I would assess it.
I think also it's important for us to be very community-driven as well.
Yeah.
So rather than just worried about us and our family. You have to be
100%.
very community driven to understand that what the next person is going through. Because obviously in a society there's different stages. There's the wealthy, there's the educated, there's the poor, there's the poverty, which you see a lot, especially in this borough in Nur.
Mm-hmm.
So again, to be community based rather than just individualistic, I think that's another kind of important aspect of how to bridge that gap. And then where do you want the kids or the future generation, where do you want them to work? Because there's now a lot of emphasis on fintech than before, or personal finance than before. And we see the likes of Wahid, you're seeing their
banners everywhere,
billboards everywhere, Mufti Menk and Khabib. But that's another aspect, because people before, where second gen, third gen, the first gen didn't really have that luxury, like you said about your parents. How am I going to budget? It wasn't about budgeting. I remember my dad saying to me a few years ago, he said they had to choose between eating and heating the house. But they didn't have a choice of, what stock should I put it in, or what ETF or whatever it is to put it in. They didn't have that. So I think now it is up to us and kind of the second, third gen, fourth gen, fifth gen now to kind of push and be a lot more community driven. Because I think they had to be individualistic then.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, I think you're right. Like when they first came, it was almost, if you're coming from an immigrant mindset and immigrant background, then you're generally kind of making sure that you're stable, right? And that everything is okay before you think about the community. So I think that now, what I'm worried about is that we're not changing that mindset quickly enough, Like there are people who are definitely beyond that level where their families are stable, they've alhamdulillah got good income as a family, they're able to eat, the house is bought, they paid for it, they're covered. Even if the house is not bought, rent is covered very comfortably, but they're still thinking in a very scarcity mindset approach. They're still thinking very individualistically. They're still trying to, they're gatekeeping, they're holding things back. They're not thinking, how can I serve the community? If the community rises, then I rise with them, as opposed to if they rise, I go down. That's the difference in the mindset. So I'm just worried that, I agree that it's much more understandable in the early days, but I think we've gone beyond that. I mean, there are multiple generations sometimes. My parents were immigrants, so there's not that many generations in my family, but there's families here that have multiple generations, right? And very established now. So while some of them might still be struggling with poverty, other of them have improved significantly. So I think it's just a matter of now, the quicker we can get out of that mindset, the more we can mobilize the entire community. I think that's the bottom line. And I'm just worried we're not doing it fast enough.
I think a key method or key way would probably be just connect yourself to the masjid. And I'm not talking about just pray your salah and come home. As in connect yourself, because the masjid is our community and the masjid is our center. That's where you meet your brothers, like-minded brothers, you meet them, or sisters will meet their like-minded sisters. And you can build your own community and become a lot more, or have a community mindset just like that, just as that one step, rather than just going in, praying, coming out. I think that's another way. And I think you tweeted something about gaining knowledge. This was a few years ago. I was just scrolling through your tweets a few years ago about everyone should take a year out or half a year out or some time out just to learn a few things about Deen. And I think what we would realize just by reading the stories of Sahaba is that they were always together. They were always about community. What does the community need? Oh, this person there needs help, or that shop needs help, that shopkeeper needs help. That's what they would put first. It wasn't, I haven't got food on the table, because we know a lot of them just would eat dates.
That's true, yeah. They thought it wasn't even individualistic first, then community. It was just community before even thinking about themselves. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's I think in terms of one of the things that I thought that would be really key and important is basically how do you enable Muslims to have the tools to be able to help themselves progress in society. And one of the things what you were talking about is taking like a year out. That was me saying like maybe it would be good for us to give Muslims the opportunity to take some time out and develop the kind of critical foundational skills that you don't really learn otherwise. Like you don't learn it in school and you don't learn it at university, and you can almost go through life and you could never learn it. And that's a huge miss if we do that. And what would be great is if everyone took it, like it's something that I wish I could have done, is take a year out, gap year, before you go to university, and you kind of learn the foundations of not just Islam, but you learn the foundations of what's important in society now. So it could be about finances, it could be about learning Arabic, for example, which is key in our religion. It could be learning about technology, how to do the basics in coding, or at least the core concepts of it. So I think those sorts of things are really key. But yeah, I don't think there's anything I disagree with you. I think regarding with the Sahaba, how they were thinking about community first, and they were very community oriented. The mosque aspect's a really interesting one as well. Like I think there's some really core foundational things. Like if you think of our community, like what makes a community, right? At the very lowest level, you have the individual. Like the individual working on themselves and improving themselves, and they can do that through some of the ways that we've talked about. They can improve themselves academically, trying to go to the best universities, but also from an Islamic perspective, learning about the deen, implementing the deen, especially in their daily life and their characteristics. I think that's not mentioned as much compared to just learning. Like, alhamdulillah, it's very important, very key to be a Hafiz, to pray your 5 daily prayers, but if you're then going out and you're swearing left, right, and center, and you're throwing rubbish on the ground, and your adab is basically non-existent, then honestly, like, how have you internalized anything from your hifz, really? So I think there's that aspect of it. How can you improve yourself as an individual? Then you think about the slight level higher, which is the family unit, right? You've got the father, the mother, wife, husband, providing each other, essentially being essentially supporting each other and helping each other become stronger, providing each other with both financial and emotional support, and obviously with kids, providing them the support. So you have that unit. And then beyond that, you have the mosque, right? And the mosque kind of encompasses the different families in the unit. So these are just building blocks, right? In the society, when you think about it. Alhamdulillah, Islam's given us the perfect kind of institutions to do these things. I mean, even beyond the mosque, you have things like zakah, right? Zakah, if done well, can really help build and plug the gaps of the society. But I don't think we approach even things like that well enough. So I think there's loads of things that we can be working on as a community. And I think things like the mosque could be, if utilized in the correct way, really revolutionary. But I wonder whether mosques are thinking in that mindset. A lot of mosques are still in the, like they serve a specific ethnic minority. The kind of, it's like a Pakistani mosque or a Bengali mosque or a South African mosque or whatever, and it's not it's not open. I mean, mosques aren't, like, that idea of being a specific ethnicity in itself is kind of weird if you really think about it, right? From a mosque perspective, it's house of Allah, it should be really open. So I think those things, I think we need to work more on. And also I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, egos that can often be attached to these things, where trustees don't communicate, I think, as well as they could with community, and they don't take in community feedback. I've spoken to sisters, for example, who felt that the communities exclude them. The mosques, the mosque community excludes them, doesn't take into consideration their needs and things like that. So there's a lot of work that can be done in that space, I think. But you're right, it could be if done well. And there are examples of very good mosques that have done it well. But I think there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of mindset change that we need to do to get there, I think.
I think that's the key word, mindset.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of masajid which are from the older mindset.
Yeah.
In terms of, we just need somewhere to pray.
Yeah.
And now it's more, you need the masjid to service the community. And like you said, there are quite a few. I think West London Islamic Centre is one.
Yeah, I really like them, yeah.
There's one, Seven Kings, which they have a community centre, and they're really starting to service the community in loads of different things, from therapy to mental health to fitness. So they're doing that. And so there's slowly you're seeing these things. But like you're saying, the demand is here and the supply is here, and we need to bridge that gap. And ideally, we need people to take action. And that's something you have done with the Pillars app.
Alhamdulillah.
So where did that idea come from? Why did you do it? How did it start? And where did you even learn these tech skills?
Yeah, so I was a medical student, and in November 2021, we heard that an app that a lot of Muslims are using, including myself, Muslim Pro, I think they have 140 million users, had essentially there was a Vice article about Vice News had said that they had sold data to a data broker, to a third party, who had then given the data or sold the data to the equivalent of the US Ministry of Defense. And as a result of that scenario, everyone obviously was very upset about it. The fact that Muslim mass data, location data, things like that was being sold off. And
how many users did you say had? 140?
well, now they have 140, but I want to say at the time, I remember it was around 100. So they've actually increased quite substantially in users, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah.
I do vaguely remember that, the data leak. I didn't know who it got sold to, but I do remember the data leak.
Yeah. I mean, you can search it now. There's Vice News articles on this topic that's still up today. That's not. I mean, this is established. I think one thing that people said is that they sold it directly, which they didn't do. They sold it to a data broker who then sold it. But the idea that you're happy to sell Muslim data in itself, in my opinion, is abhorrent, regardless of whether it's for consumer purposes. If they're not explicitly, very clearly opting in and happy with it, it's concerning. And then there are certain use cases which are completely red lines, like the one that ended up happening. So I think that started and triggered a whole backlash and wave. You have people like Sheikh Omar Suleiman tweeting on social media. There's multiple other. It was trending topic. I remembered like that not just that day, that week was kind of everyone was coming down hard on Muslim Pro, and it was that moment that made me think. I was a fifth year medical student, and I said to one friend that was doing another degree at my university at UCL, and said to him, why don't we do something about this? We were both very busy. Obviously came out suddenly, the news, and we didn't really do anything at the time. And we just carried on. At the time I was working on another mentorship platform that I was building called MedMentor. And about a few months later down the line, he comes back to me and says he's free, and if I wanted to work with him on it. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And what we thought first was let's just do a community project. Let's create this prayer app alternative and just open source it, put it on the internet, let anyone kind of build on top of it, etc. The idea is that there's this open source, very privacy focused, very transparent alternative app out there, and the community can build on top of it. And subhanAllah, that was the reason why I was just sharing it. I used to be someone who used to keep all my ideas to myself. Unfortunately, I was one of those people who was worried that someone would steal my idea and take it. But because I was thinking of this in a very open, community-centered way, I ended up sharing it. And it was that sharing that meant that when I shared things like the design for pillars, the very first designs for pillars, that the tweets went viral. Or not all of them, but some of them went viral. And as a result of that, we had a lot of traction. We got people signing up to our newsletter. And we had, I think when we eventually launched the app in the first weekend, we have 10 to 15,000 downloads. And that was only because we were very open and kind of what we call now building in public. It's kind of become almost like a mechanism of growing, a more formalized mechanism of growing, but essentially showing your process of building an app, putting up screenshots of it, the designs, asking for feedback, putting up polls, getting people's input, etc. And that was the kind of the Muslim Pro aspect. The privacy aspect was obviously kind of the trigger that made us think, let's do something now. But I mean, we were generally not happy with the experience with not just Muslim Pro, but just generally prayer apps out there. All of them had pretty bad UI, we didn't really like the designs. They had ads that were really annoying, that often had things like gambling and games and sometimes even partial nudity. And so we thought, how can we have prayer apps, right? Prayer, salah being so important, a pillar of our faith. How can we have something like that isn't doing the job in an Islamic way, right? Islam should be beautiful, it should be simple, it should be kind of clutter-free, and salah should be that too, right? So we wanted to try and create a prayer app that we would consider something we would like to use, and like a prayer app that we would use on a daily basis, and inshallah other people would like to use it. And alhamdulillah, it transpired that people did like it as well, and we got users off the back of it, so alhamdulillah.
I remember on Twitter I think you'd post a screenshot and you just ask for feedback, or you'd have an idea and you'd ask for feedback, and so many people would comment.
Yeah.
And obviously because it's a global thing. It's not just related to one area. It's a global thing.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times important. And obviously, you can use your app wherever you go now, which as long as the location is set,
Yeah.
wherever you go, it updates automatically. But when you are building publicly, how did you change your mindset from pretty much gatekeeping to, just letting people build? Was it because it was such a community thing?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a few things about building in public. Like, some people think that you can only build in public when you have a significant Twitter following or social media following. But actually, I had only a few hundred followers before Pillars, and it was only from sharing the journey that people started following me, right? Because people follow people who are doing interesting things, generally speaking, right? You start to follow someone because you see something, they're building that interests you, and then you want to follow the journey. So that was, people sometimes get it the wrong way around, and they think they can't do building in public because they need to have the followers first. But actually, it was the opposite way around. And the other thing that I often tell people is that it wasn't just like, I didn't tweet one once and the first one got like hundreds of retweets. It was actually like, I remember the first, I can't remember exactly how many, but the first several tweets would get maybe 5-6 likes, a few retweets, 2 or 3 retweets, which was actually quite good for me at the time. I remember I used to be happy. I was like, oh wow, I'm getting engagement. But that's still small in the grand scheme of things. It was only, I think, the widget tweet that made it go, that was like a semi-viral tweet. And from then I started getting like hundreds of followers, and I started getting emails signing up to find out about the release. So I think that those are just 2 really key things that people who want to do building in public should just remember, that they don't need to have followers and they don't need to expect the first tweet to do super well. They should just be persistent, and eventually, inshallah, if people like the idea, you either get feedback to improve it or you'll get traction. If people, there's only 2 scenarios, right? It's black and white. If people love it, they'll retweet it and they'll like it and they'll bookmark it and it will go viral. And if people don't, they'll give you feedback and they'll tell you how to improve it so that you can get to a point where the idea you share is one that people really, really resonate with, and then that's something that I should work on. You're literally getting live mass feedback from across the world. But yeah, to better answer your question, you asked me what made me go from the gatekeeping kind of mindset to the more open one. I'll be honest, and it's not something like I didn't become a better person. It was just because I genuinely thought that this is something I'm going to open source anyway. So if I'm going to open source it, and it's not going to become like something I work on long term, it's just something that I'm doing as sort of a voluntary short-term community project, then it doesn't really matter whether I share it or not, because you can't stealth build an open source project, right?
Yeah.
Because you're going to be sharing it. So it was because of that was the reason that made me feel comfortable sharing it in public. Any other business idea I had at the time, if you probably asked me, I probably would have told you, no, I don't want to share that. I don't want someone to steal that idea. Now I realize that concept in itself is ridiculous, because most people in the startup world realize that if you build an idea, if you build a project, it's not someone stealing it is not going to be the reason why it fails. 99.9% of the reason why these ideas fail is because you didn't execute well, or because the idea itself wasn't worth it. But people will assume that actually they're holding on to gold every single time. Every idea is gold, whereas reality is that 99% of business ideas are not going to succeed. And actually you need to make sure that you have that 1%. And the only way to check that is to ask people about it as much as possible.
So you don't have any ads on the platform?
No.
How did you fund it?
So people often think that we have like money for developers and stuff. So our costs are really low. That's the first thing to say, because both me and my co-founder, at the time it was Tariq, now it's Omar. I changed co-founders. Me and Tariq parted ways on good terms, but he went on to pursue other things, and I'm now working with another guy called Omar. But throughout the whole history of Pillars, we've always had the skills in-house to be able to build. So I've got the design and marketing skills, he's got the technical skills. We've never hired external individuals and paid external people, which is your main cost as a startup. It's usually, if you're building a startup, the biggest cost is hiring people. So if you don't need to hire people because you have the skills in-house, you tend to have relatively low costs. Usually costs for a tech business like ours are going to be things like software costs, hiring costs, maybe server backend costs. Now, we didn't need to hire anyone. we don't even have a back end for the business. Like we're not storing any data, because the way that Pillars was built was on the idea that everything is done locally. So even your prayer times, it's not that we're getting your location, then calculating it for you and then giving it to you. We don't collect that data. We don't even see it. Everything happens on the phone, on the device. Your prayer times are calculated on the device itself. It's a bit like how Apple, the iPhone, if you've been following like Apple Intelligence or how Siri will work, the models, the initial models work by calculating everything on the device itself. So they don't have to go to the servers and come back. And that way you retain more privacy. So we did that. We started on the device only. Because we didn't have any server costs and because we weren't hiring any external people, our costs have been relatively low. But obviously, the whole time we've also been working on Pillars part-time. That's changed recently. I'm now basically using my own personal runway, my own savings to keep things, to essentially pay myself whilst I'm working on Pillars. But that's because I feel so passionate about it and I want to work on it full-time. The next step really for us is to launch a premium subscription. So if we really want to now be able to hire more individuals and bring people into the team, also support ourselves, because right now I'm just using my savings, then the only way to do that is to help get the company to monetize and get revenue into the company. Now, people have different opinions. Some people say something like Pillars should always be free, everything about it should be free. That could work if we had huge amounts of financial support and backers and donors, etc. It's not a very sustainable model. Lots of people have tried to do that in the past. Lots of people also try to maintain these projects on the side, and often they get busy with family, illness, etc., and children, marriage, things like that, and it's often projects that can't be maintained. So we think the best way to make sure that Pillars can A, exist even in 50 years' time, but also B, grow and build even more useful products, more useful features in the app, and products in general to help serve Muslim problems and needs. The best thing that we can do is provide a service that gives people loads of value, and then the people who want to pay for those services and provide support can pay for a subscription. And then inshallah what we can do is I can go full-time, my co-founders can go full-time, our team can go full-time, and we can hire the best people, like a world-class team that can build out the best products for the Ummah. And I think that that's the best way going forward. So what we're working on right now is a premium subscription called Pillars Premium, and inshallah that will include a lot of features that people want to use, and we know people want it because we keep getting asked for these. We have a list of features that people keep asking us for, and we want to work on those features and prioritize them and put them in the premium subscription. And inshallah that would help Pillars both become a company that has full-time employees and can work on it full-time, and also help grow and build other products beyond just the Pillars app.
So what are some of the features that are going to be released?
So I'm going to basically mention to you the things that we just focused on. What are people asking us, right? The most obvious thing to do is just think about what users want. So the things that people really want are things like the Apple Watch. So I've actually got the beta version of the Apple Watch on me right now. So people want the prayer times on their watch. They want the complications so they can see it on their watch face, etc. There's things like prayer reminders. People want to be reminded that there's 15 minutes left of a salah window so that they can prepare for the next one, or so that they can avoid missing that salah. There's also things like syncing with your Google Calendar. There's a lot of people who work in the corporate world who want their prayer times to sync in and even be smart enough to move between meetings. So if you have a space between meetings, it can jump up. There's also other things we're working on, like Google Home and Alexa devices. People have, those old school prayer clocks that you have, which cause the adhan. So what we want to do is make it the modern version, which is like Alexa devices that a lot of people have, and Google Home devices that a lot of people have, even Siri devices, or the Apple smart speakers that people have. And that will call the adhan throughout the house. So you have this nice adhan playing throughout the house, which a lot of us grew up with, which I think is now less and less, unfortunately. So we want to revive that, right? Even if you're in the UK, you should be able to hear the adhan reverberate around your room. I think it's a really nice, like I've been testing it actually at home, and it's really nice. I tested it throughout Ramadan as well. So there's a lot of features like that. Additional times, like people want to know the last third of the night, the middle of the night, so they know when to do tahajjud, they want to know when Isha ends for them, people want to know when duha starts, or for example, when the second, if you pray Asr, at the first mithil, when the second mithil is, so that you can make sure that you pray between the first and the second mithil, and avoid praying it late in the Asr window. I believe it's makruh for a lot of madhahib to pray Asr just before Maghrib, for example. So yeah, basically these are like super, super high requested features that people have asked us for, and we're basically bringing them all together and inshallah packaging them into a premium feature. I don't know if it will work perfectly. I think this is something that we're going to see. No one else has done anything like this in this space. Unfortunately, most of the innovation that happens in this space is basically put ads and pay us if you want us to remove it, or selling the data. So we're trying to do something beyond that, and we're trying to provide people with real value through these features that they have asked for, and that inshallah that will help support pillars and help us bring even more value to our users.
Going back to what you said earlier about there's a big kind of debate about whether pillars or generally an Islamic app should charge and shouldn't charge. And I think my personal opinion is they should charge because there's a value attached to it.
Yeah.
It's an investment. If you're paying £5 a month to make sure you get your salah times, a notification, I'm just giving an example, that's an investment into not just this world, that's an investment into the hereafter. So that's where I look at it. But obviously there's certain people who may not be able to afford it, and there should be some concession for them.
Yeah.
And how you do that, or how any founder or app founder does that, that's up to them, whether they do it on trust or whether they... I don't think people would be asking for bank statements or anything. It's like it's only a few quid. So I think there's a balance. But I think generally, and that goes with Islamic knowledge as well, they should charge. And they should charge at a good level because it's a big investment. And the person or the company, for example, with Pillars, if you need to recruit people to make it a world-class app, you need world-class people. So you need to recruit them world-class people. That money has to come from somewhere. So either it's donations, but that's not really sustainable, or subscriptions, which is a lot more sustainable, and it will take a longer time to grow. But I personally think anyway that yes, you should charge.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a few options, right? You can either keep doing it as a side project, and it's like a voluntary project that may or may not get maintained if the team gets busy with family life as usual, or even they're just regular full-time job, then it dies. And there's so many apps like that on the App Store that are unmaintained apps. They started off really great, and then they suddenly stop being maintained because the founders behind it get busy. You can either ask for donations and support through donations. I can tell you now, there's no one who is getting enough funds that way to maintain it. No one at all that I know in any Muslim business that has gone through that route, that has been able to maintain things through that. Our community is very generous, alhamdulillah, but the money that people tend to donate is to places like Pakistan, Gaza, Palestine, Iraq, Syria, etc. And so most of our funds are going towards those people who are in need back home in our own countries. They're not going to go towards projects that are done in the UK and the US, etc. And so you're kind of limited. And I mean, you can charge a subscription. That's kind of the only thing that you can do. And it's what everything else in society is, how everything else is sustained to work. I mean, people are paying more than that, 10 to 15 pounds a month for Netflix, right? And what do? They expect a service where they provide new content on a regular basis. Now, if you're willing to pay, and no one questions the idea of needing to pay for that service to continue to get value, why do people question that when it comes to things? I mean, you have great apps like Tartil, for example, that have a premium service. I was talking to the Qur'ani founder. Now, he has a really interesting model.
What's his name?
Off the top of my head, I've forgotten now.
I can't remember either.
Yeah, Isa. So brother Isa.
That's very good,
Yeah. Qur'anly, I think, subhanAllah, very simple idea to start with. Now they've built it up much more. But even just to start with, I remember the first iteration, very simple, but such a game changer, right? Just the idea is build a habit. Build the habit of salah. I like to think of Tartil as like, of Qur'anly as the thing you start with, then you graduate to Tartil. I mean, it's like a bit of a pipeline. So Qur'anly, they have a model where it's kind of paid, But you can say to the app that you can't afford it, and there's like a kind of contract that you make. You have to put your thumb against it and say like that Allah's watching, and that if you're genuinely can't afford it, then put your finger and we'll give it to you for free. Otherwise, please pay for it. But you have the app access for free. Like, they haven't unlocked any extra features. It's a really interesting model, and that works for him. But when I spoke to him, he always saw this as a side project that he was going to maintain. He's not working on it full time. He does a lot of other work in the dawah scene full time. So there's interesting ways around it, but the only ones that I've seen that are sustainable are the ones that have some sort of charged component to them. Even the charity platforms are all, as far as I know, for-profit charity platforms that operate on a for-profit basis. And that's because you need to be able to have an A-class team that works full-time as well. So you need both those components to really be able to build out the feature sets for your apps and websites so that you can be able to serve the needs. And by the way, we're working on a very small number of problems for the Muslim community, but if we want to work on other problems for the Muslim community, that also helps us do that. When we have a full-time team, we address one problem and the next problem. I mean, when you think about individual features, they're individual problems. Right now, our users, someone is sitting there and going, I need to calculate what time the end of Isha is. I need to work out what the middle of the night is or the first third of the night so that I know when Isha is. And they could spend 5 minutes doing that, going through working it out on an online calculator, if we have it in an app straight away and you see it, and maybe you press a shortcut and it creates a Siri shortcut, and you actually get an alarm 20 minutes before, or you text yourself, or it sends you a notification to say, hey, by the way, there's only 20 minutes left until the middle of the night. You need to pray Isha now, otherwise you're going to miss it. Those sort of things are genuine value adds. They're saving you time. Every day you're saving a few minutes of time. They're making your life easier. Same thing with the Google Calendar. You being able to know, I need to go, I've got back-to-back meetings, I need to pray right now, otherwise I'm going to miss the other meetings. That's value add. That's helping people. Being able to hear the adhan. If you're a family, you have kids in your house, you want them to hear the adhan. It's an environment. I remember growing up having the Mecca kind of speakers that my parents used to buy from Saudi. Yeah. That was a huge change in the way that I grew up, and it was normalized, right? Now you don't have that. You don't hear it out in the streets and in the malls. You need to hear it at home, otherwise you're not going to hear it. And so that's another aspect of it. So alhamdulillah, I think these are a lot of things that users have asked us for. Things like tasbih now, like you can carry your tasbih around. But now these days we have smartwatches, right? So one of the features we've actually built is the ability to do tasbih on your actual watch. So you can literally just tap.
Does this sync with a Fitbit? I have a Fitbit.
Fitbit in what way?
So the same way you can do that on an Apple Watch, can you do that on a Fitbit?
Oh, with the tasbih? So that's not something we have now, but it's something on the roadmap. I thought you meant health data. No, I was trying to think how that. No, so there's people request for Apple Watch, people request for Google.
I think Fitbit's Google.
And Samsung as well.
Yeah.
Fitbit got bought by Google, so maybe there's software overlaps. I don't know enough about that, but there's basically what we're doing is going through the request and starting with the most popular one. Apple Watch is by far the most popular smartwatch out there, but there's things like Samsung Galaxy Watch and other Android watches. Fitbit will be on there, like that people also want. So eventually, as we go down the list, we're going to be supporting all of these, inshallah.
So would you collab with?
But that's why you need a full-time team. You need people who are able to develop in the languages it's not easy to develop for across these boards, and not just develop but maintain them, right? But that's what you need. And I don't know, there's a little bit of a disconnect in the expectations that community has and the resources that they expect that the organizations have. And I think that's not just us for us at Pillars or other Muslim tech companies. I think that's a problem in general for Muslims, right? I think that's something that we need to get over and address, inshallah.
But I think also nowadays, people want things now anyway, because they have everything at their fingertips, literally.
Yeah.
You want food? Okay, Uber Eats. You want a cab? Uber. Amazon next day, same day even. So everyone wants things immediately, and that's kind of the expectation you have to have. But
I think sorry to interrupt, but another problem is that people have gotten so many freebies by selling their data, but they don't realize that. They think that if I use Instagram is free. I don't pay for Instagram. Do you pay? No one pays for Instagram unless you're paying for verified, but you're not, generally speaking, people don't pay for Instagram. But Instagram makes billions of dollars in revenue. How? Why? Because you're selling, essentially selling data, selling you ads, showing you ads all the time, and that's how they make their money. It's by data and analytics and ads. So if Muslims, I guess not just Muslims, people in general have become very used to getting things which they think is free, which is not actually free. It's all through giving away your data and your attention and selling you ads. But people become so used to that when you do come up and say, you know what, we're not going to sell your data, we're going to sell your ads. We're going to put a premium subscription. If you want to just use the app as it is today, feel free. It's free and it will always be that way, and you're welcome to use it in that way. But if you want to support us and you want these extra features that will help you, if you feel that they will help you, then support us with a small monthly subscription. And that's how we're going to sustain this app for everyone, inshallah. So yeah, that's an important point.
Would you collab with other apps? Example, Tertil, Quranly. There's another one they can do. So example, you've just prayed your salah and then you want to read some Quran, so you can just literally, rather than building a whole Quran inside the app, you can just read Quran and it takes you directly to Tertil or takes you to wherever. Is that something you guys are looking to do as well?
Absolutely, and it's funny you say that because I sent a voice note to Anas, who's one of the co-founders of Tertil, literally, I think maybe less than a week ago, talking to him about this very point. He hasn't responded to me yet, but inshallah he will soon. So Anas, if you see this, please respond to me because I'm waiting for your response. But essentially, both Quranly and Tertil actually. The idea is that we want. First of all, I don't like replicating things that other people do really well. I consider Quranly and Tertil to be doing really well in the Quran space. Generally speaking, I think they're doing excellent stuff. Tertil's tech is unbelievably good, and so if they're doing it, we one of the requests we get a lot is, can you please build a Quran in our app? But we don't think that that's a good idea if people like Quranly and Tertil exist and they're doing the job really well. So what we've decided to do is, why don't we integrate, exactly like you say, so that when someone finishes the Quran, let's say they've set that they want to read 5 verses of Quran a day on Quranly, or they want to do a page of recitation on Tertil. When they complete that target, whatever target they've set on whatever app they want, once they've completed that tracks it in pillars, and it says, look, we've got a tracker on pillars, so you can tick off when you've prayed Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. Once you've ticked all those things, maybe there's another box that says tick for Quran, you've achieved your, just like you have a walking target, right?
Yeah.
To walk 5,000, 10,000 steps, whatever your target is. Maybe there's a target that you set depending on your level of how much Quran you read. And when you do that on Tertil, automatically you find that it's ticked on the Pillars app. And that way you have like this tight integration across the Muslim ecosystem. I mean, I think the Muslim ecosystem is getting quite strong actually. Like you're starting to see apps. Those are the Quran apps, we're a prayer app, but you also got the other apps in the space. You've got apps like Kestrel, and you've got apps like Wahid and IFG, and now you've also got Muz for marriage. You've got all these different apps in the system, and there is a potential to actually bring these all together. I don't know, maybe one day there's an opportunity to do like some sort of one subscription that kind of gives you access to all of the premium aspects. I've had that idea for a while, but I don't know how realistic it would work. But I think that could be a really interesting approach to it.
And I think it's not about creating competition, it's about finding gaps.
Yeah.
Find a gap and then build that gap, rather than creating competition, because there's 15, 20, probably hundreds of different Quran apps.
Yeah.
Even like dhikr apps, there's so many.
If people are doing them well, because I think there's two sides. Obviously, we were not the first prayer app to exist, but I think that the reason we decided it was still needed is because we felt that all the existing options were not doing a good job. So we were going to come and build a job. But I think in the Quran space, there are examples of really good Quran apps. So I don't know if it's necessary for Pillars or anyone else to think, let me come and build in this space. So that's why we would rather, in that situation, integrate or collaborate with them. And Tertil said the same thing to us, actually, is that we don't, like, essentially what we said to each other is like, you guys are doing what you're doing really well. And they said to us, we're doing what we're doing very well. So let's just collaborate. And so on our FAQ page, we have like a question which asks if we're going to integrate Quran, we actually say, no, it's not on our roadmap. We recommend you check out Tartil. Tartil do the same thing to us. So we have that sort of collaboration. And that's just generally a mindset and a framework and approach that I would love to continue to have myself, but also the community to have when it comes to these things. Unfortunately, what I saw though, is when we launched Pillars, for about 5 to 6 months, we didn't launch Pillars. When the Muslim Pro situation happened, no one did anything. I don't think I saw a single prayer app launch or a single alternative exist. But for 5 or 6 months, and then when we launched and we got traction, I suddenly saw at least 4, 5, 6, 7 apps that weren't even just like prayer apps launching. That's fine if people want to do that. I mean, I'm not going to ever complain that people are creating prayer apps. That's a good thing. But the fact that they just took the designs, for example, from our app, I thought, there's a lot of problems in our community. I would love for these individuals to go and think about solutions for them, rather than fix a problem that someone else is working on. Perhaps they felt that Pillars wasn't doing a good enough job in some regard, and so they decided to do an alternative. Perhaps, maybe I'll give them that benefit of the doubt, to be fair. But generally speaking, I really, really like a collaborative approach. And as much as possible, I often get people reaching out to me and saying, Abdul Rahman, I'm working on this feature. I think it would actually be really good for it to be part of Pillars, or vice versa. Or sometimes I see someone doing something and I think, wow, that was actually on our roadmap. Let's reach out to this brother and say to them, do you want to join our team and build what you're building, but as part of Pillars? And often I've had at least 2, maybe 3 guys on our team that are as a result of that. They were just people who were building something that was on our roadmap. And I offered and they joined, and alhamdulillah, credit to them, they were happy to join forces. But some people may not choose to do that, that's fine. But generally speaking, what I like to do is collaborate, as opposed to, they're gonna do that and I'm gonna do this and we're just gonna compete on that playground. I think you shouldn't do that unless, if you think that they're not doing a good job, then fair enough. But if they're doing a good job, just let them do what they do, or provide them the resources so that they can do it even better. That's the way that I'd like to think about things. Just because that we really don't have enough resources we have so many problems and so little resources. We can't pull all the resources into just 2, 3, 4 problems. But I find what happens is, this is like one of my friends told me a really funny joke. He's from East London as well. He was saying to me, when a burger joint or a restaurant does really well on a street, every 3 or 4 pop up in the exact same area.
Yeah.
And subhanAllah, I think that's partially a mindset, a scarcity mindset that we have. We think that there's one pie, and if someone has a bit of this pie, then this person cannot take.
Yeah.
You've now taken, this pie is this big, and you've taken a quarter of it. Now I've only got 3/4 left. And so if I'm going to quickly take my bit before someone else takes it. And there's a rush to take, because everyone thinks there's a limited pie. We all think there's a scarce amount of resources. But in reality, I mean, even Islamically, that's a very un-Islamic thing to think, to think that there isn't enough for everyone, that Allah can't provide 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, unlimited amount of pies, and that you can have your entire pie to yourself and this person can have their entire pie to themselves. I mean, it's actually embarrassing that us Muslims don't have a mindset of abundance, because that's an Islamic mindset. The idea of rizq, that Allah can provide unlimited resources, that should be everyone's mindset, right? But we have the opposite mindset, and it's not, I don't want to call it kufr, but it's deeply un-Islamic in the way we think about it. So it would be really, really nice for Muslims to start to think about it as, look, this person's done really well, mashallah, let's go work on another problem so that Allah can, inshallah, put barakah and rizq in what we do and solving that problem. As opposed to, that burger joint's really well, so let's set 5 burger joints in the same area and all compete for, I mean, how many burgers is everyone really going to eat? At the end of the day, there's only a limited number, so they're not all going to do well. Eventually, what funnily enough ends up happening often in these scenarios, according to my friend who's in the restaurant business, is that the whole thing, everyone fails. Because one restaurant was doing super well, now there's 4 or 5, and then everyone's starting to spread it along. And reality is the business is not going to work unless they have a critical mass. Exactly. So they all end up closing down. And subhanAllah, that's what I feel like is pretty applicable pretty much across the board. And it's unfortunate, but that's the situation we often find ourselves in.
I think that's, again, going back to a lot of the things you said, it's a mindset thing. And it is a scarcity mindset. And there's always a small group that comes out where they take action and they do something innovative. And over time, as generations go by, that group gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So now we're seeing so many people in tech building so many different things. Like, I can't remember, I think Saqib from Simply Smash, he's building Project Bilal.
Yeah.
Something like that. You've done Pillars. You've got Muslim Tech Fest, they have loads of different...
Saqib's a great example because we're good friends and we spoke, and he's very much a collaborative mindset, and he was like he was essentially like, look, we're going to try this. If it works out well, we'd love to work with you on it, and almost like kind of collaborate and build it. So like that's the kind of approach.
To be honest, when you said building in public, the first person that come to my head was when he was building or when he was opening Simply Smash, because he literally built it in public.
He built it in public, yeah.
And he still does it because we're thinking about this flavor or this burger or these wings, and then he asked for feedback.
Yeah, mashallah, it's weird because it's building in public is online, but he's a physical place, right?
Yeah.
You need to be in the area to be able to enjoy Simply Smash. But now you have people from the US saying when they come to the UK, I want to try out this Simply Smash place, because they've had so much of it online. Mashallah, now they've got, I think, one of the highest rated burger joints in the entire of London. They kind of got like this plaque, Google plaque, because they've got such high reviews, mashallah.
But it goes back to building a community. In business, you have to build a community, which essentially, it's like the sales funnel, isn't it? The community is at the top, and then it trickles into being customers. And that's what he's done. That's what you're doing with Pillars. How many users are you on, by the way?
So we crossed 1 million, alhamdulillah. Yeah. So,
what's your end goal? Not in terms of users, just with Pillars. What's your vision for Pillars?
That's a really... I mean, the line that we used very early in our day was to build tools that enable the community to elevate themselves. And I think that's the bottom line. So we want to be essentially the tech people in the community that builds tools, that helps, and it goes back to those, how I was talking about units, the individual unit, the family unit, and then there's the mosque unit. I genuinely, because I think that's it. If the individuals are strong, then the family will be strong, right? And if the family is strong, then multiple strong families will make a very good Muslim community at the mosque level, right? And then there's obviously institutions that are beyond that. But I think just to start with the bottom, I'm very much a kind of grassroots, upwards sort of person, and try and control what you can control in yourself rather than top-down control and top-down influence. If that's the best way, essentially, we can influence change on a mass scale. If you help build these building blocks, if you make these building blocks stronger, then you have really strong foundations for the rest of the community. So what I think Pillars' job is, inshallah, if Allah allows it, and may Allahumma istakhdimna wa la tastabdilna, may Allah use us and not replace us. If Pillars is in this position where we can essentially be the tools that allow individuals to improve themselves, right? So we let Muslims work on themselves, improve themselves, and that's what a lot of our features are going to be about. I mean, I spoke to you about some of the features that users have asked for, but a lot of the features that we want to bring is really focused about how to help Muslims become better Muslims, better versions of themselves. And if we can help that, and the other thing that we want to do is not so much for the family part, although that is one of the key units, but the mosque part. If we can help mosques become better versions of themselves, serve their communities in the best way possible, and we can build technology for mosques, then inshallah what we can do is we make these units, these building blocks stronger, and that can hopefully overall help provide and support a even stronger community in the larger sense. So that's a very vague but very high level vision for the entire vision for Pillars in terms of how it can serve the community at large, inshallah.
I just thought of another feature actually. You probably have it on your roadmap.
Go for it.
Just wherever you are in the area, and if somehow you can connect with the local Masjid Salah times.
Yeah.
I know there's websites out there, but there's no combined app. If that can be combined, so just say you're in Stratford, and you can in 15 minutes Salah's taking place at this masjid. Something like that would actually be quite cool.
Yeah, I mean,
it's probably on your roadmap.
That's been one of the very highly requested ones. To be able to find mosques nearby, be able to quickly check what times they're praying, like the prayer times and Jama'ah times, navigate even announcements and things like that. Like just the entire, like a lot of mosques come to us and they say to us, to the Pillars team, they email us, call, message us, and say, we want you to build us an app. We keep getting that request. And so what we're thinking, okay, well, every mosque wants to build their own app, but mosques aren't specialists when it comes to software. Mosques are going to spend a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of money on building it if they decide to hire a team in Pakistan or India or whatever. So there's a lot of costs associated with it. The other aspect is users themselves don't want to, third point is mosques don't really have the time to maintain the app. They may do it for a few months, but long term, people move in and out of the area. Mosque administrators change a lot of the time. People get busy. They don't have a lot of time to maintain the app very well. And the community themselves, I mean, I don't know what I would do, because I would have one mosque that I might go to, like 2 or 3 mosques in my local area, some mosques near my office in central London. So what am I going to do? Download 5, 6, 7 apps? Realistically, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to deal with 6, 7 different apps with different UIs and different notes, all of them sending me notifications about prayer times. What do users really want? They want one app that can connect them to all of these mosques, get updates, communications, prayer times, iqamah times, Jama'ah times, from all of these mosques, and be able to interact with these mosques, all ideally on one app with a really nice user experience. So we want to work on that. That's when I mentioned the mosque level. That's one.
There is an app.
There are a few, but I don't think anyone's cracked it. But I've spoken to quite a few.
There's one called the Masjid app.
There's the Masjid app, and there's the Masjid app, but there's also a few others. There's Sawa. There's a few.
Yeah, look at
So I'm in touch with Yusuf, one of their co-founders. Okay. The Masjid app I know, it's the white background with the blue or purple pillars, right?
Yes,
So mashallah, I'm definitely aware of them, but I think this is one of those examples where I don't think there's a solution that has cracked it across the board. But by the way, they're not the first, and they won't be the last who've worked on this space. There've been a couple of iterations of other apps before them who've tried to work in this space. But I don't think anyone has been able to create a user experience where everyone has started to use that app. And whether we are the ones or not, I don't know. Maybe it's them, maybe it's someone else. I think Sawa is a really good app actually that is in this space. And mashallah, a very, very good team behind it that I'm in touch with and working with. And they're very, very open to collaboration. So I've been in touch with them and talking to them. I think I was in touch with the Masjid app as well at one point, but I haven't been for a while. So alhamdulillah, I think there's good work to be done, but I don't think, I think it needs to get to a point where it's all stable enough so that there is...
runs very seamlessly.
Yeah, it runs seamlessly, and there isn't so much, there isn't a risk of someone like not maintaining it. I think a lot of the times I download apps that don't feel like they're fully maintained or updated as regularly as you want. And even talking to like the guys like Yusuf, it's really, really, really difficult actually to maintain the prayer times for mosques. Mosques often get busy, they don't update it. There's loads, I've actually been talking a lot to, not just, funnily enough, I had a meeting with him, I had a meeting with Saqib, we all were on the group chat very recently. We were talking about the different projects that everyone's working on and how we can essentially work together to work on this problem. So there's to be honest, there's a lot of work happening in the background behind this, but I think we're not quite at the level where everyone's worked it out. So actually a collaborative effort right now is a really good idea, and we're doing that, alhamdulillah.
Okay, I know we don't have much time. I just want to ask you one final thing. If you had a 16-year-old Abdul Rahman sitting next to you, where he's surrounded by doctors and everything, what are you advising him?
So I don't think, I think I mentioned it, I don't regret going to medical school. So I'm not going to tell them not to do medical school. What I would say to them is explore early and explore as much as possible. So I wish I did more things like explore tech, explore coding, branch out beyond my close sphere in the early days. And also the other thing I would say is don't underestimate how much free time you have. Because I think at that stage, you think you're super busy, but you don't realize that you're not busy at all and that you've actually got tons of time. And unfortunately, you don't realize that until later when you realize you're super busy all the time. So I think that's the main thing, is just to use your time as much as possible. and explore as early as possible. I think I think that's probably the key thing. And I guess the other thing I would do is what I mentioned earlier, which is like I'm not sure how I would phrase it, but essentially the idea of not be open with your ideas, be open with your approach. Don't kind of, I mean, I learned this through pillars actually. Alhamdulillah, it was a lesson for me. But kind of if I could avoid of having to learn it through that and just being very open with my ideas and thoughts, that's always the best approach. And actually, you don't know, like you can work on so many different things. The thing that you think is going to be super successful could be the thing that does really badly. The thing that you thought, oh, that's not going to be really a big thing, could be super successful. So Allah can bring us from places that you don't know, and that's actually part of our deen. Like we learn that you don't know where the profit, where the benefits are going to come from. I'm a doctor by background, but pillars became a really big thing for me. Who knew that, right, when I was starting medical school?
No, of course, very true. Abdul Rahman, it's been a pleasure.
No, Jazakallah khair. It's been
Sure,
great.
we could go on and on. We haven't even spoken about Jibreel yet.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Another
fun
time,
day.
inshallah.
Thank you very much for your time.
No, Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.